Hello everybody, thanks for joining us for today's video. We're going to follow up on the video from a couple days ago about sleep and kind of get more in depth on talking about why sleep is so important and why it's so beneficial for your mental and physical health. So I think a lot of times we talk about sleep and we think of it as a very physical thing, right? Like you have to sleep or you're going to pass out or die or whatever. But shifting it towards the mental side of things, why is sleep so important?
I actually read, this is probably my book of the year. I know it's only, I don't know what month it is. It's August, right? But my book of the year this year is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, because he goes through and talks about all of this stuff. He talks about sleep and how it affects everything. But I was super interested in some of how he said that it affects our mental health. And one of the things that he talked about is how it makes us a lot more prone to mood swings. So if you're trying to be stable in the mental health realm and you're not getting enough sleep, your moods are going to swing from side to side. Now, this happens more and more obviously with the less sleep you get, right? There's that correlation. But what he found is that even if you're only getting 6 hours of sleep at night instead of 8, that starts to happen. So this is something that's really super important. If you are not getting enough sleep, you are not giving yourself the right kind of stability within your mental health. You're going to find things that are fluctuating way up and down.
Yeah. I think of all the, I feel like it's becoming more and more commonly known and more accepted that exercise is a really important part of mental health, very physical thing. And it falls into that same category, that your body and your brain they're just connected in pretty much every way. And so if you're neglecting something that seems very physical like sleep, arguably it's more harmful to your brain than not exercising, I would say.
One of the downsides to this too, or maybe it's not a downside, but it's a frustrating side, is what do you, whether it's you two or even people that are watching this, what's the first thing that you do when you have too much to do on your plate?
Get rid of sleep.
Get rid of sleep. That's
Sure.
exactly what you do. You're like, well, I don't have enough time in the day. And so we kind of think that giving up sleep to dig ourselves out of the hole is the answer. I'd make the argument that's the worst answer you could have.
Right? Well, and one of the reasons that we got into this discussion is because we've been talking about...
You can hear that plane in the...
It's so loud. One of the ways we got into this discussion is because we've been talking a lot about self-care. And one of the things that I think people can do most for self-care is get consistent sleep. This doesn't mean 1 or 2 days a week or that you try to catch up on the weekends. This means this is something that you do every single day, is get that consistent sleep. And not burn it at both ends because you're going to pay for it in the realm of your mental health.
Okay, so I have a question with that, because I agree. I feel like I'm seeing a fair bit of younger adults, so call it early 20s, maybe late teens, who are very hardworking, they're very successful, they do all of the things that they need to be doing. But I find they're sleeping in 4-hour chunks, doing their thing in 4-hour chunks, right? So they might sleep from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and then they'll go work, and then they'll sleep again from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then they're up
Till 2 a.m. again.
Thoughts on consistent but interrupted sleep?
I don't know. I had a friend who actually tried this one time.
Do you?
And I don't know how much of it is true, but he had said it came from this is how humans originally slept, thousands of years ago. This was the normal sleeping pattern.
Okay.
And so there was some idea, right, that if you get back to that, it's really healthy and somewhat productive, and then you're kind of never tired because you're always sleeping, intermittently. But he really struggled with it. First of all, how do you keep a job sleeping on that schedule? That's just not the way the world functions anymore. But also, even if that is how we slept 1,000 years ago, we're 1,000 years past that now. I think our bodies have probably adapted to sleeping at night and being awake during the day. I think that there's a lot to the fact that we're wired to be awake when it's light outside and asleep when it's dark.
Sure.
Right. The other thing that I would say is that one of the sleep hygiene steps that a lot of people don't like to do is this idea of getting consistent sleep. This means that you go to sleep at the same time every single night and you wake up at the same time every single morning, because you're training your body to sleep. And when you're sleeping in increments like that, I don't know how you ever train your body to sleep. I don't know how you ever train your body to shut down enough to go to sleep.
Good point.
I also think, like, not all. This is like the cruel joke of like our bodies, I think. But I read somewhere that it takes us like 6 days to get into like a sleep routine. But how many of us sleep on a routine for 5 days, and then on the 6th day, on Saturday, we stay up, or Friday night, we stay up all night, and Saturday night we stay up, and then back on our routine for 5 more days. Like, we're never really letting our body get into any routine, which I'm very guilty of, because I'm like, I don't want to give up my Friday nights. But
Yeah, that's totally me.
Right. And then sometimes we have to stop and ask ourselves, okay, well, so you can do this. You can stay up late on Friday night, but you are sacrificing your mental health. And this is something that I think is really unpopular when it comes to these discussions with all of our clients, because nobody wants to hear that to be mentally stable, you are going to have to give up some things like really late Friday nights. If you want to be stable, you have to be consistent with your sleep. And it's not something we made up, and I know it sucks. Like, I get
Sure,
it.
yeah.
I know I don't love it either. I don't like to have to wake up early on Saturday mornings. I would love to be able to just sleep in all day, you know?
Yeah.
But if I do that, I am going to sacrifice my mental health. And so I think this is one of the things you have to look at, and you have to say, okay, well, what are you willing to do to feel better? Are you willing to actually sleep?
that's kind of like a broad principle for all of therapy, right? Like, all of it's going to take some sacrifice. It would be great if we could have all of the things we wanted and all of the vices and also have great mental health, but it just doesn't work that way.
No.
I think it's important too to remember two things really. One, just because somebody else is able to do it on 6 hours of sleep doesn't necessarily mean you will. There's this thing that we talk about called genetics. And if you have a genetic predisposition to a mental health condition like depression or anxiety, then you need more sleep. Like, there is no question about it. Whereas maybe somebody who doesn't have that genetic predisposition, they might be able to function for a little while on 6 hours of sleep.
Or even just getting older.
Definitely getting older.
I've noticed a significant difference, like, from when I was 20 to now being almost 30. Like, if I stay up all weekend, I don't recover, like, until the next Thursday. You know what I mean? Like, I can't just, like, get up and be okay on 5-6 hours of sleep anymore.
Right. Well, and a lot of us that struggle with mental health disorders, our bodies are just more sensitive to things like this. And so we would like to not be able to stick to some of these sleep hygiene things, but our bodies are going to be too sensitive to it. And we're going to be sacrificing our mental health, and there's not a way around it. You know, I have a lot of clients who want to say, well, I don't like this, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just focus on these other things, these other components of therapy instead. And you can do that, but you're going to shortcut the kinds of results that you can get in therapy if you're not going to get the amount of sleep you need.
The other thing I wanted to throw out there, which I think I talked a little about earlier in a different video this week, the brain has a natural recovery process when you hit that REM stage of sleep. That's that rapid eye movement stage. And if you don't allow yourself to hit that rapid eye movement stage, then the brain doesn't do its own self-healing. And so that for me was one of the big indicators of if you do like broken up chunks of sleeping, you might not hit that REM stage within that 4 hours, right? Oftentimes that 4 hour stage is where you start to hit that REM stage. But if that's wake up time,
it's not going to happen.
yeah, you're not doing that.
Right. And actually, a lot of people don't know that the most important part of your sleep usually comes between hours 6 and 8. So you can't just sleep 6 hours and think that's not going to affect you. Actually, those last 2 hours of sleep are often the most restorative and healing for your brain.
Yeah.
And so cutting yourself short is actually cutting your brain short the time that it needs so that you can function better, and just so that your brain can deal with some of the difficult things that you've been through and store it in a more adaptive way.
That makes sense, because I had just seen some new research actually that they're suggesting that your risk of getting Alzheimer's or dementia is directly related to not getting enough sleep, because it needs that time to like clean out all the gunk essentially. And that would make sense, right? If you're not getting those last couple hours of sleep, your brain never gets those important times to clean itself out, and then eventually it gets all filled up.
Yeah. In Matthew Walker's book, he talked a little bit about how it's sort of like you've got this giant chunk of rock, right? And throughout the night, your brain is chipping away at it, sculpting it into something. And yeah, you could get some big portions of that, sculpted out within those first 6 hours, but the last 2 hours are all of the detail work. And what is that sculpture going to look like if you cut out all of the detail work? And if you do that night after night after night with your brain, then you're never going to be able to find a way to function at your very best capacity.
I like that.
So if you guys were to throw out perhaps one thing that you would throw out as an intervention to a client with sleep, super quick, what would you throw?
My first one is always screens. Just I think we live in a screen-filled world. We got TVs in your room, you got your phone next to your bed. So I always suggest decide when you're going to bed. So let's say it's 10:30. At 9:30, plug your phone in and do something else, like read a book, write, draw, something that doesn't require a screen, something that's relaxing for your brain. So when you go lay down, your brain kind of knows, look, it's time for bed, and you're in a little bit of a routine.
Fair enough.
I like that one. Mine is, this is something I go to with probably everything, but is consistency and predictability. Your body needs to know what time you're going to sleep and what time you're waking up, and it needs to be the same across the board. If you want to get good sleep, it has to be on some kind of a schedule. Otherwise, you're not training your body to sleep.
Good point. I think one of the things I mentioned earlier, because I see this fairly regularly, is watch out for taking a nap. I think we all feel tired in the middle of the day. It's natural. If you take a nap, it's going to affect your predictable bedtime, and you'll feel the consequences when you can't fall asleep.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Hopefully this was helpful. Now turn it off and go to sleep, and we'll see you on the next video.
Thanks.